Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
The international bestseller Eat, Pray, Love tells the story of author Elizabeth Gilbert's solo journey around the world searching for peace after a difficult divorce. The sequel, Committed, a Love Story, is also on the bestseller lists. Ms. Gilbert recently stopped by our studios to talk with Shannon Vickery about her books, her works, and the insights she has gained.
Ms. Gilbert, welcome to North Carolina Now.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You are an author of many books which have been read by millions of people throughout the United States, across the world, most notably Eat, Pray, Love, and your latest, Committed. What brings you to North Carolina?
I'm on a book tour, and I always like to come through here. It's you know, there are states that I think are more literary in certain ways, and North Carolina has this deep storytelling tradition, and I think people just like to kind of gather around the fire or the bookstore and hear stories, and I've always just felt really welcomed here.
You have been in North Carolina before because your 2002 book, The Last American Man, profiled Eustace Conway, who lives here in North Carolina, up in the Boone area. What was the experience like of spending time with him and then writing that book?
That was an extraordinary encounter for me. Those of you who don't know Eustace know he's a mountain man, a modern-day mountain man who lives in the woods outside of Boone, and really self-sufficient, rugged individualist. And I was living in New York City at the time as a journalist. I couldn't have had a more different life, but I just found him to be the most charismatic, complicated, maddening, and interesting person. And I wrote a magazine article about him, and it wasn't enough. I had to delve in and do a full book. So I was down in North Carolina a lot for that.
After that, Eat, Pray, Love became an international bestseller, turned into a major motion picture. What was that experience like, first of all, to write your own story and then to see it take off in this way?
It's been pretty crazy. I mean, it's not something I ever would have expected to have happen. And when I sat down to write Eat, Pray, Love, it's hard to imagine it now, but I actually thought that I was writing the book that would be the least popular of everything I'd ever done, because it was the most intimate, and it was a huge departure from what I had done before. I'd always written about men and about super macho things, and obviously Eat, Pray, Love is not that. And for some reason, it turned out that, you know, my own private trials and tribulations were a reflection of apparently like millions of women's thoughts across the world, and it tapped into something, and I just feel like it flew out of my hands and became something that didn't have anything to do with me anymore after it was gone, but it's been amazing to watch it spinning around the world, having its own life.
You followed that book up with another memoir, Committed. This time, you take a look at marriage. What did you find about the institution of marriage, and why did you want to write this book?
Well, Committed picks up pretty much where Eat, Pray, Love left off, and you know, I had sailed away into the sunset with my Brazilian lover at the end of Eat, Pray, Love, a very romantic ending, but then we wanted to build a life together in the real world, and we were scared of getting married. We'd both been through bad divorces, so we thought, we'll stay together, but we won't get married. And the Homeland Security Department had another plan for us. And there was an incident at an airport, at a border crossing, and essentially I was told that the only way I could have this man in my life was to marry him. And so I set out to write this book as somebody who had failed at marriage once, to try to figure out once and for all what it is, what it isn't, what it has been, what it was never intended to be, and where I could find a place of comfort for myself within this old and ultimately really interesting institution.
What did you find out about marriage that most surprised you during this journey?
Probably the thing that I thought was most interesting was this statistic that shows that in every culture, as you move from traditional ideas about marriage as an arrangement, sort of a business contract, into modern ideas about marriage as a love relationship, divorce rates immediately soar, which just seems counterintuitive, but really, apparently love marriages are not as strong as business contract marriages, because I guess we can all live with a business deal gone wrong, but once the love is left in marriage, it's very painful to live with somebody. And I almost have come to feel that love is how should I say this, that divorce is the price we pay for believing in love or for linking it to marriage, and the stakes can be really high, but when it works, there's nothing better than that kind of partnership.
Now that you have written 2 books about yourself and your own journey, what is next? What are you working on today?
Well, I think I've probably said enough about me. My husband is very sweet. After the second book, he said, yeah, that's enough about us for a little while, I think. And I agree, you know, and I feel like both of those books were really important in my life to work me through knowing myself and then knowing how to interact with the other, which are, of course, the central questions of all of our intimate lives. But now I want to go back to writing fiction. It's where I got my start as a writer, and it's been, gosh, over a decade since I wrote a word of fiction, so I'm working on a novel now again, which feels like a homecoming for me.
According to your biography, you knew from a very early age that you wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
What inspires you about writing, and where do you find your stories?
Well, I come from a family of storytellers. We were big at sitting around the dinner table and kind of outdoing each other with stories. My grandfather always used to say, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. You know, so I had that background, and my parents really encouraged us to read. We didn't have a TV in our house when we were growing up. We had to kind of invent our own worlds, my sister and I, and we both turned out to be writers. And both of us knew it from an early age. I just think that in the world of imagination, the idea that there are these realms of other universes and other people's lives that you could enter through the majesty of literature has always impressed me more than anything else in the world, and I consider myself luckier than anyone I know that I've been able to dedicate my life to the thing I love the most.
What advice would you give to others who would like to follow in your footsteps and become an author?
You know, I feel like it sounds almost corny the way I say this, but it has to be a holy calling. You know, I feel like I was called to a life of writing the way other people might be called to ministry or to medicine, you know, where you just know that it almost can't be a choice. You know, when people say to me, I'm trying to decide if I want to be a writer, I think you're not there yet, because it isn't really a choice. The only choice you have is, do I answer the calling or do I ignore it? And if the calling is there, then I don't know. My uncle said to me once, you'd be 10 kinds of fool to not follow it if you were given that clear message about what you're supposed to do.
What do you hope ultimately your readers take away from your work, whether it's the nonfiction work or fiction?
First and foremost, I think my obligation is to entertain them. You know, I feel like lots of times I read books where I feel like the author has forgotten that somebody's on the other side of that page, and I think you have to show a certain consideration, whether you might want to do sort of pure experimental work just for your own jollies. You have to remember that somebody's obliged to read this and that they've given you their time, and you should reward them for that by bringing them an entertaining story. And if they get anything past that, especially with the memoirs where I'm examining my own life and mining my own subconscious and trying to find answers to huge questions, if it helps them on their path, then all the better still. But at the very least, I always hope that my books go down easy.
Finally, if our viewers want to stay connected, find out what's next with you, what do they need to do?
I guess they should go to my website, elizabethgilbert.com, and yeah, the story continues to evolve.
Liz Gilbert, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us.
Thank you. My great pleasure.
Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.